I even had my water here.
Look, this here is a pulpit. Take a look here. Take a photograph from top to bottom to make a pulpit like this for me in Brazil. Right, Tuca? Take a photograph from top to bottom so you can take it to someone to make a pulpit like this.
It's done. It's done. Well, I want.
Greet my dear companion Janja, my dear companions, ministers Ricardo Lewandowski, Minister of Justice and Public Security, Minister Camilo Santana of Education, Minister Marina Silva of the Environment and Climate Change, Jader Filho, Minister of Cities, Marcia Lopez, Minister of Women. Also accompanying me was my friend Sonia Guajagara, the Minister of Indigenous Peoples, who will stay in New York. I want to greet my dear companion, the governor of the state of Ceará, Elmano de Freitas, who came here to attend a meeting with TikTok because he is announcing a data center in the state of Ceará at the port of Pechem. I want to greet my dear colleague Celso Amorim, who is my special advisor at the Presidency of the Republic, and colleague Aldo Falles, who is another special advisor, our dear Ambassador Maria Luisa Ribeiro Viotti, Ambassador of Brazil to the United States, and our dear Sergio Danese, who is at the table as the permanent representative to the United Nations, and our Ambassador Mauricio, who is our negotiator for all the difficult causes of this country, and Igreja, who is my chief of protocol, is the guy I argue with the most, okay? And the wife of the comrade, Rosangela, Angela, the partner of our ambassador. Well, my partner, Janja, is the first. I don't know how many times women have traveled with their husbands just to play the role of First Lady. Janja came here to have a schedule, I think, more intense than mine. She came before me. She attended a meeting, Women's Awakening. It was lunch with the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Then she had a meeting of special envoys with groups of Afro-descendant women and human rights about COP30. Then she had a dinner for the special envoys of COP30. Then there was the high-level meeting on regenerative school feeding for people and the planet. Then there was a meeting with the executive director for Africa and Global Partnerships of the World Resources Institute. Then there was a high-level ministerial breakfast for nutrition champions. Then there was an event, Brazil's Perspective on the Way to COP30. And thank God she's free to accompany me back to Brazil. Well, I think this meeting of the UN, it has a very gratifying importance for Brazil. First, because we wanted to emphasize in the speech we made at the United Nations the idea of multilateralism, the idea of democracy, and reinforce our GOP 30, in Belém, in the Amazon, in the month of November. And besides being able to give a speech that raised this topic, I had another satisfaction of having a meeting with President Trump. What seemed impossible stopped being impossible happened. And I was happy when he said at the COP that there was a good chemistry between us. As I think that human relations, it is 80% chemistry and 20% emotion. I think this relationship is very important, and I hope it works out, because Brazil and the United States are the two largest democracies on the continent. We have many business interests. We have many industrial interests. We have many technological and scientific interests. We have a lot of interest in the debate on digital issues and artificial intelligence. We have a lot of interest in commercial matters. Therefore, if we are the two largest economies and the two largest countries on the continent, there is no reason for Brazil and the United States to live in moments of conflict. I made a point of telling President Trump that we have a lot to discuss. There are many interests of both countries at stake. There is a lot to discuss about the need for us to ensure peace on planet Earth, and I was pleased when he said that it is possible for us to talk, and maybe someday we can meet and create a positive agenda between the United States and Brazil and the United States. That's what I want, and I think that's what he should want too. In my relationship with the head of state, the thing I respect the most is that the head of state, if he was elected by his people, I don't want to know ideologically if he likes or doesn't like me, if he professes the same ideology as I do. That is never at stake in my relationship with the head of state. And I don't want it to be at stake in people's relationship with me. What matters to me is that the person being elected deserves my respect as the Brazilian head of state in the relationship on matters that interest Brazil and the United States. Everyone knows about my tenacity in behavior regarding finding peace. I can't understand why the world, wants to destroy when we need to build. It's not normal what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. What is happening in Gaza is not normal. The amount of conflict we have is not normal, which is the highest number since 1945, the end of the World War. It's not normal, the number of countries spending trillions of dollars on armaments when we could spend trillions of dollars to end world hunger with 670 million human beings going hungry. It's not normal, the amount of inequality that still exists on the planet, gender inequality, racial inequality, food inequality, opportunity inequality. And it is up to us to use the resources we can produce in each economy so that we can reduce this inequality and make planet Earth a normal habitat, for all human beings and not just for a few privileged ones who hold many resources. I think this is what we are going to discuss from now on. That's what I am imbued with the desire to discuss. I am very happy because we had ended hunger in Brazil in 2014. When I returned now in 2023, we had 33 million people once again going hungry, and we ended hunger again in 2.5 years. And this thing is a demonstration that if all the world's leaders include the poor in the budget, we can end poverty very quickly, because besides 670 million people going hungry, according to the FAO, we still have 2,300,000,000 human beings with food insufficiency. This is unbelievable in a world that produces enough food for everyone. The problem is that people do not have the resources to access food. And then when you see people spending trillions in weapons, trillions in wars, we have no explanation for the behavior of humans in treating their own human species. So I returned to Brazil very happy with the things that happened here. The construction was very important, of the fund of the TFFF, that is the Tropical Forest Forever Fund, because it is not a donation fund, it is an investment fund. And whoever invests will make money, and part of that money will be used to keep the forest standing in the countries that have it. In the case of Brazil, it is very interesting because besides having the largest forest reserve in the world, we still have 40 million hectares of degraded land where we can reforest with whatever we want. A demonstration that the climate problem depends purely and simply on the political will of each leader, and more importantly, on us believing in science, you know. It's no longer about a president of the republic saying, I think, I believe. No. When we are in office, we don't think or believe. We observe what science says and we comply, you know, in the best possible way to solve this problem. And it has already been proven that we have the means to keep the planet's temperature below 1.5 degrees. It's already proven. It's just willpower. It's just willpower. And at the same time, we have to use fossil fuels, but with the expectation that we will have to use this money to invest, you know, at the end of fossil fuel, so that we can make the energy transition more competitive and effective to provide energy security for humanity. I think this will happen in Belém. I have said that in Belém, we are going to hold the Truth Cup, because if we don't hold the Truth Cup, humanity will lose faith in these meetings of heads of state. So there's G7, so there's G20, so there's BRICS, so there's COP, so there's a lot of things, a lot of things, a lot of things, a lot of things. A lot of things are discussed, and the things that were discussed are not applied. So there's no reason for humanity to keep believing. So this COP, I have said, it will be the COP of truth, because we will have to get some scientists to speak to the heads of state. It is very important that President Lula, I invited President Trump to go to the COP. If he's there, it is very important that President Macron, it is very important that Prime Minister Modi, it is very important that everyone who attends listens to the scientists say what is happening in the world to facilitate our decision making. All of you know that I also advocate for stronger global governance. That is why we have been fighting for a long time for the United Nations to be reformed from its statute to its composition, with all permanent or non-permanent members, because it is poorly represented. The photograph of 2025 of the world is no longer the photograph of 45. Countries have evolved. Humanity has evolved. So it is necessary to have more countries. It is necessary to end the right to veto in the United Nations. The right to veto needs to end, and especially on the issue of climate, when we take a position that has a vote, it is necessary for everyone to comply. Then yes, if a country does not comply with a decision that harms the planet, it deserves to be punished, not unilaterally, but by the group of countries and by humanity as a whole. Now, this has to be discussed. This needs to be discussed. The United Nations is not just for the permanent members who became permanent members when it was established. The United Nations belongs to humanity, so we need to reform the United Nations so that it has the power to prevent wars like in Gaza, to prevent wars like Ukraine, to prevent the number of conflicts spread around the world today, and at the same time, we make the decision to solve the climate issue that could lead humans to become the first living animal capable of destroying its natural habitat. It's a fantastic thing, because they say we are the only intelligent animal, and we are among the only ones who kill without necessity, steal without necessity, you know. And at the same time, I took to every way. We destroy the home we live in. This is the challenge presented at COP30. That's why it's being held in the Amazon. There are many people who give opinions about the Amazon. Many people talk about the Amazon without knowing the Amazon. And people need to know that in the Amazon of South America, more than 50 million people live. And these people live, you know, in cities with various problems. And therefore, we have to take care of that. This is the challenge that is presented to us. This is the challenge that we came to bring to the debate we had about both the Tropical Forests Forever Fund and in the discussion of the NDCs. The meeting is not over yet, but I think the countries are presenting quite vigorous and reasonable NDCs, you know, and I think this will be very important because it is the first demonstration of seriousness about the climate issue. It is the NDCs to be strong. Brazil presented from 59 to 67%. It is a strong proposal from Brazil, and we presented it in all economic areas, and we will still fulfill our commitment. Our commitment, it is not a commitment with anyone. It's a commitment of us with ourselves. You know, I would say, in a rustic way, of us with us, you know. We made the commitment to reach zero deforestation in the Amazon by 2030. And therefore, since no one asked us to propose it, we proposed it. We have the responsibility to fulfill it. Well, then I return now to Brazil, satisfied with our meeting, optimistic about the possibility of Brazil and the United States having a meeting, you know, as soon as possible, and ending the discomfort that exists today in the Brazil-United States relationship. That's what I wanted to say to you and leave a bit for you to ask questions, because if I said everything, then I wouldn't need to answer questions. I would leave. But I will let you ask some questions because it's fair for the freedom of the press that we so defend, that the press can ask questions without veto.
Without veto.
I know.
Mr. President, thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association.
There is no translation here.
Por fazer. Were you sleeping, Sergio?
Vou começar de novo.
My interpreter is asking you to start over.
Certo, senhor.
President, thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. President Trump talked about his feeling of chemistry.
Quando ele te encontrou, você também sentiu essa química?
E o que você esperaria que fossem os resultados do seu encontro com o presidente Trump, que entendemos que pode ser já na próxima semana? Obrigado.
Look, the Brazilian people have high expectations for a good relationship between the United States and Brazil. And I think the American people do too. It's important, Victor, for you to know. I have a very long-standing and strong relationship with the American labor movement for many, many years, and I think that it is very important that we are well, because we need jobs, we need better wages. We need more investment both from Brazil in the United States and from the United States in Brazil. And what do I expect? I expect that in a conversation between two heads of state, we put on the table what our problems are, what our differences are, and start making decisions. I am convinced that some decision made by President Trump were due to the quality of information he had regarding Brazil. When he has the correct information, I think he can change his position easily, just as Brazil can change its position. You know, I think that's what happens. What happened with my meeting with Trump is that we had never met before. And we met by chance. In that same room, I already met with Bush. I already met with Obama. I already met with the Biden. And I had, I can't always meet with American president. I met with President Trump. I extended my hand to him, greeted him, and told him that Brazil and the United States have a lot to discuss. There are many issues at stake, and there are no limits, to discuss topics. And there is no veto on topics. It can be any topic. But for that, there has to be a conversation. I have many things to discuss, and I'm sure he has many things to discuss. I think that between two heads of state of two important countries like Brazil and the United States, we need to talk based on true data, on true things, and antecedent. And I think he's poorly informed regarding Brazil, and possibly this has led him to make some decisions that are not acceptable in the relationship between two countries that have had diplomatic relations for more than 200 years. So when we have the meeting, I think all of this will be resolved.
And Brazil and the United States will return to living in harmony and chemically stable.
I will pass the word to Augusta Saraiva from Bloomberg. Good afternoon, President Augusta Saraiva from Bloomberg. President, still on President Trump, I would like to know if you could give us a little more detail about what Brazil expects to bring to the table, and if you see room for tariff reduction right after this first meeting, and if it could be in person, and who would participate. Thank you.
It would be premature on my part to say what I'm going to negotiate before I start negotiating. Then it would be like vetoing even the possibility of conversation. Look, we have to sit down, put all the problems on the table, the problems he has with Brazil, the problem I have with the United States, and from there we start to discuss. Look, what is not negotiable? It is Brazilian sovereignty and our democracy. That is not up for discussion. Not with President Trump, nor with any president in the world. This is Brazilian sovereignty that we do not give up. I think he has incorrect information about Brazil, and I want to make it clear to him, according to his interests in wanting to know. I will speak what is happening in Brazil. I can tell you that from the point of view of the interests of the Brazilian people, the common people, the business community, and the political class, there is a desire for dialogue between us. There is a lot of desire, a lot of investments at stake. We have a very important trade flow, So I don't know who told President Trump that he had a trade deficit with Brazil. He had a surplus in 15 years of $410 billion. So since I don't know who gave him the information, I hope that sitting at a table, me, him, his advisors, my advisors, we can restore the necessary harmony that must exist between Brazil and the United States. When there are elections in the United States, I don't get involved. And when there are elections in Brazil, he doesn't get involved. That's how we do it. We respect the result of the people's sovereignty at the polls in each country.